It's another beautiful morning. It's always a wonderful morning on Shabbat. Honouring the Most High God. Psalms 107. Praise Adonai, for he is good, for his loving kindness endures forever. Let the redeemed of Adonai say so, whom he redeemed from the hands of his foes, whom he gathers out of the lands, from the east and from the west, from the north and from the sea. Some wandered in the desert and the wasteland, and they found no way to inhabit a city. Hungry and thirsty, their souls ebbed away. So they cried out to Adonai in their distress, and he delivered them out of their troubles. Then he led them by a straight way to go to a city where they could live. And let them praise Adonai for his mercy and his wonders for the children of men. For he satisfies the thirsty soul, and he fills the hungry soul with goodness.
Yeah.
Are you hungry this morning?
Yes.
Yeah.
Trust you're hungry each day, not just on Shabbat. Let's rise together as we honour Yahweh. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod, Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed. Hear, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Blessed is his name and his glorious kingdom for all eternity. And you shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I am commanding you today are to be on your heart, and you're to teach them diligently to your children, and to speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. Bind them as a sign on your hand, and they to be a frontlets between your eyes, and write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And you shall love your neighbour as yourself. And the entire Torah and the prophets hang on these two commandments.
To rock of our salvation, and sing to the Lord.
before the Lord our Maker, worship and bow down. Here before the Lord our Maker, worship and bow down. Here before the Lord our Maker, worship and bow down. Here before the Lord our Maker, come into His presence with praise, singing and shouting, proclaim that Adonai is a great God. Come into His presence with praise, singing and shouting, proclaim that Adonai is our King. Yes, Adonai is our King.
Takes a bit of wrapping your tongue around those words, doesn't it? It says make a joyful noise, and that's what we did.
I am yours. send me. I'll go where you go. Lead me.
For those that aren't familiar with our service, we have a number of Parashah readings which continue right throughout the whole year and basically cover the entire Torah and a number of parts of the Ketuvim, or the prophets and the writings in the Netivim. We also have readings from the Brit Hadashah, which we refer to as it's the New Covenant readings. And this morning, the Parashah is the Shalach, which means after he had let go. And we'll explain a little bit more about it, and you'll get the gist of it as you read through the scriptures. So the Torah reading commenced this morning with from Exodus 13.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. After Pharaoh had let the people go, God did not lead them along the road to the land of the Philistines, although that was nearby. For God said, the people might change their minds if they see war and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the way of the wilderness to the Sea of Reeds, and Bnei Israel went up out of the land of Egypt armed. Moses also took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had made Bnei Israel swear an oath, saying, God will surely remember you, and then you are to carry my bones away with you. So they journeyed from Sukkot and encamped in Etham on the edge of the wilderness. Adonai went before them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead the way, and in a pillar of fire by night to give them light, so they could travel both by day and night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night never departed from the people. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Bnei Israel, so that they turn back and encamp before Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. You are to camp by the sea opposite Baal-Zephon. Pharaoh will say concerning Bnei Israel, they are wandering aimlessly in the land. The wilderness has shut them in. I will harden Pharaoh's heart, so he will follow after them. Then I will be glorified over Pharaoh, along with all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am Adonai. So they did so. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his servants had a change of heart toward the people, and they said, What is this we have done, that we let Israel go from serving us? So he prepared his chariots and took his people with him. He took 600 of the finest chariots, along with all other chariots of Egypt, and captains over them. Adonai hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so he pursued Bnei Israel, for Bnei Israel went out with a with a high hand. But the Egyptians pursued them with all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, as well as his charioteers and his army, and overtook them as they were encamped by the sea, beside Pi-hahiroth, opposite Baal-Zephon. When Pharaoh drew near, Bnei Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them. So they were terrified, and Bnei Israel cried out to Adonai. They said to Moses, "Have you taken us away to die in the wilderness because there were no graves in Egypt? Why have you dealt this way with us, to bring us out of Egypt? Did we not say to you in Egypt, 'Let us alone so that we may serve the Egyptians'? It was better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." But Moses said to the people, "Don't be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of Adonai, which he will perform for you today. You have seen the Egyptians today, but you will never see them again, ever. Adonai will fight for you while you hold your peace." Then Adonai said to Moses, "Why are you crying to me? Tell Bnei Israel to go forward. Lift up your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it. Then Bnei Israel will go into the midst of the sea on dry land. Then behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will go in after them, so that I will be glorified over Pharaoh and all his army, his chariots and his horsemen. Then the Egyptians will know that I am Adonai, when I have been glorified over Pharaoh, his chariots and his horsemen."
G'day. Then the angel of God, who'd been travelling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night, the cloud brought darkness to the one side and light to the other side, so neither went near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots followed into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He made the wheels of their chariots come off, so they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and their horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The waters flowed back and covered the chariots and the horsemen. The entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea, and not one of them survived. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the great power of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses his servant. You know, under that stretch of water today are Egyptian chariot wheels and chariots and weapons of war. And it's been videoed, and it's a matter of fact.
I have a documentary about that if anyone wants to see. It's got archaeological findings. And I love these scriptures that talk about the victory of the Lord, because not only did the Israelites experience that, and the Egyptians watched on and they experienced that, but also those all around. And it's like those victories in our lives that there's others watching on. I know I've had a lot of doubters, not here, watching me back home take strides toward what the Lord has said. And they've said, well, if it's God, it'll happen. But it's happening. And it's so exciting to see this new season. But that's what God does, doesn't he? Others will see. Okay, 15. Then Moses and Israel sang this song to Adonai. I will sing to Adonai, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea. Adonai is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will glorify him, my father's God, and I will exalt him. Adonai is a warrior. Adonai is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he has hurled into the sea, and his chosen captains have sunk into the sea of the reeds. The deep covers them. They sank to the depths like a stone. Your right hand, Adonai, is glorious in power. Your right hand, Adonai, dashes the enemy into pieces. In the greatness of your excellency, you overthrow those who resist you. You send forth your wrath that consumes them as stubble. With the blast of your nostrils, the waters pile up. The floods stood upright as a heap. The deeps became firm ground in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My lust shall gorge on them. I will draw my sword, my hand will destroy them. You blew your wind, the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like you, Adonai, among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, awesome in praises, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. You, in your loving kindness, led the people you have redeemed. You guided them in your strength to your holy habitation. When the peoples hear, they will tremble. Anguish will seize the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom are terrified. Trembling grips Moab's mighty men. All of Canaan's inhabitants will melt away. Terror and dread will fall on them. By the greatness of your arm, they will become as still as stone, till your people cross over, Adonai, till the people whom you purchase cross over. You bring them in and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, the place, Adonai, where you have made yourself to dwell in, the sanctuary, Adonai, which your hands have prepared. Adonai will reign forever and ever. For Pharaoh's horses and his chariots and his horsemen went into the sea, but Adonai brought the waters of the sea back over them. Yet Israel walked in the midst of the sea on dry ground. Then Miriam, the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women went out after her with tambourines and with dancing, as Miriam sang to them. Sing to Adonai, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea. Bitter waters made sweet. Then Moses led Israel onward from the Sea of Reeds. They went out into the wilderness of Shur, but they travelled 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink from the waters because they were bitter. On account of this, it was called Marah. So the people complained to Moses, saying, What are we going to drink? So he cried out to Adonai, and Adonai showed him a tree. When he threw it into the waters, they were made sweet. There he made a statute and an ordinance for them, and there he tested them. He said, if you diligently listen to the voice of Adonai your God, do what is right in his eyes, pay attention to his mitzvot, and keep all of his decrees, I will put none of these diseases on you which I have put on the Egyptians, for I am Adonai who heals you. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. So they camped there by the waters.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. They travelled on from Elim, and the whole community of the people of Israel arrived at the Sin desert between Elim and Sinai on the 15th day of the second month after leaving the land of Egypt. There in the desert, the whole community of the people of Israel grumbled again against Moshe and Aaron. The people of Israel said to them, we wish Adonai had used his own hand to kill us off in Egypt. There we used to sit around the pots with the meat boiling, and we had as much food as we wanted. But you have taken us out into this desert to let this whole community starve to death. Adonai said to Moshe, here I will cause bread to rain down from heaven for you. The people are to go out and gather a day's ration every day. By this I will test whether they will observe my Torah or not. On the 6th day, when they prepare what they have brought in, it will turn out to be twice as much as they gathered on the other days. Moshe and Aaron said to the people of Israel, this evening you will realize that it has been Adonai who brought you out of Egypt. And in the morning you will see Adonai's glory, for he has listened to your grumblings against Adonai. What are we that you should grumble against us? Moshe added, what I have said will happen when Adonai gives you meat to eat this evening and your fill of bread tomorrow morning. Adonai has listened to your complaints and grumblings against him. What are we? Your grumblings are not against us, but against Adonai. Moshe said to Aaron, say to the whole community of Israel, come close into the presence of Adonai, for he has heard your grumblings. As Aaron spoke to the whole community of the people of Israel, they looked towards the desert, and there before them the glory of Adonai appeared in the cloud. I've got some symbolic letters there, so I'm not sure what they... Adonai said to Moshe, I have heard the grumblings of the people of Israel. Say to them, at dusk you will be eating meat, and in the morning you will have your fill of bread. Then you will realize that I am Adonai your God. That evening quails came and covered the camp, while in the morning there was a layer of dew all over the camp. When the dew had evaporated, there on the surface of the desert was a fine, flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the people of Israel saw it, they asked each other, Man who? What is it? Because they didn't know what it was. Moshe answered them, It is the bread which Adonai has given you to eat. Here is what Adonai has ordered. Each man is to gather according to his appetite. Each is to take an omer, 2 quarts, per person, for everyone in his tent. The people of Israel did this. Some gathered more, some less. But when they put it in the omer, the measure, whoever had gathered much had no excess, and whoever had gathered little had no shortage. Nevertheless, each person had gathered according to his appetite. Moshe told them, No one is to leave any of it till morning. But they didn't pay attention to Moshe, and some kept the leftovers until morning. It bred worms and rotted, which made Moshe angry at them.
Shabbat Shalom. I think these readings really show us what God was wanting to do with the children of Israel was to build relationship with them, and what he really wanted from them. He knew what he was going to do, and he wanted them to ask him to supply their needs, and that's what he's asking us to do, to believe in him. And so instead of asking, they complained, and they still got what they wanted, except they missed out on relationship, and that affected them later on when they didn't trust Adonai when going into the land, and it meant they spent the time in the wilderness that they didn't need to do. So this whole thing about trusting God, listening to him, obeying him is really important. And starting at verse 21, so they gathered it morning by morning, each man according to his needs, and as the sun became hot, it melted. On the sixth day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each individual. So all the leaders of the community came and informed Moses. But he said to them, "This is what Adonai has said. Tomorrow is a Shabbat rest, a holy Shabbat to Adonai. Bake whatever you would bake and boil whatever you would boil. Store up for yourselves everything that remains to be kept until the morning." So they set it aside until the morning, just as Moses instructed. And it did not rot, nor were there any worms. And Moses said, "Eat that today, because today is a Shabbat to Adonai. Today you will not find it in the field. You are to gather it for 6 days, but the 7th day is the Shabbat, and there will be none. Yet on the 7th day some of the people went out to gather, and they found none. And Adonai said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my mitzvot and my Torah? See, Adonai has given you the Shabbat. So on the 6th day he gives you the bread of 2 days. Let every man stay in his place, and let no man go out on the 7th day." So the people rested on the 7th day. The house of Israel named it manna. It was white like coriander seed and tasted like wafers made with honey. Then Moses said, "This is what Adonai has commanded. Let a full omer of it be kept throughout your generations, so that they may see the bread which I fed you in the wilderness, which I brought you out of the land of Egypt." And Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put a full omer of manna inside, and store it up before Adonai to keep it throughout your generations." Just as Moses commanded, Aaron stored it up in front of the testimony to be preserved. Bnei Israel ate the manna for 40 years, and they ate the manna until they came to an inhabited land. And when they came to the borders of the land of Canaan, now the omer is a 10th part of an ephah. And I was thinking with that the manna stored up in the Ark of the Covenant never had any maggots in it. It stayed good because that was the will of Adonai.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. At Adonai command, the people of Israel left the Sin desert and moved from places to place. Eventually they came to Rephidim, but there was no water to be found there. So once more the people grumbled and complained to Moses. "Give us water to drink," they demanded. "Quiet," Moses replied. "Why are you arguing with me? And why are you testing Adonai?" But tormented by thirst, they continued to complain. "Why did you ever take us out of Egypt? Why did you bring us here? we, our children, and our livestock. We all die. Then Moses pleaded with the Lord, what should I do with this people? They are about to stone me. And Adonai said to Moses, take your shepherd, staff, and one you used when you struck the water of the Nile. Then call some of the leaders of Israel and walk on ahead of the people. I will meet you by the rock of the Mount Sinai. Strike the rock, and water will come pouring out. Then the people will be able to drink. Moses did just as he was told. And as the leader looked on, water gushed out. Moses named the place Massah, the place of testing, the Meribah, the place of arguing, because the people of Israel argued with Moses and tested Adonai by saying, is Adonai going to take care of us or not? While the people of Israel were still at Rephidim, the warriors of Amalek came to fight against them. Moses commanded Joshua, call the Israelites to arms and fight the army of Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand at the top of the hill with the staff of Yahweh in my hand. So Joshua did what Moses had commanded. He led his men out to fight the army of Amalek. Meanwhile, Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the nearby hill. As long as Moses' lead held up and stopped with his hand, the Israelites had the advantage. But whatever he lowered his hand, the Amalek gained the upper hand. Moses' arm finally became too tired to hold up the staff any longer, so Aaron and Hur found a stone for him to sit on. Then they stood on its side, holding up his hand until sunset. As a result, Joshua and his troops were able to crush the army of Amalek. Then the Lord instructed Moses, write this down as a permanent record and announce it to Joshua. I will blot out every trace of Amalek from under the heaven. Moses built an altar there and called it, Adonai is my banner, he said. They have dared to raise their fist against the Lord, against Adonai, thrown so now. And Adonai will be at war with Amalek generation after generation. Isn't that amazing? You know, it says that we should really determine to do about complaining. And this is what I've learned, and we should make a determined effort to pray when we feel like complaining, because complaining only raises stress. Praying and quiet our thoughts and emotion and prepared us to listen. Thank you.
We
That song was a good song to sing right then, because that was why they complained all the time. They didn't want to wait for God. And that is so like us. You may be seated. We'll continue with the readings. Thanks, Vivian.
Right, we're in Judges 4. Now Deborah, a woman who was a prophetess, the wife of Lepidoth, was judging Israel at the time. She used to sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Beth-El in the hill country of Ephraim, and Bnei Israel came up to her for judgment. Now she sent and summoned Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "Hasn't Adonai, God of Israel, commanded, 'Go, march to Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men of the sons of Naphtali and of the sons of Nebulun? Then at the Kishon torrent I will draw out to you Sisera, commander of Yavin's army, with his chariots and his multitude, and I will give him into your hand.' But Barak said to her, 'If you are going with me, then I will go. But if you aren't going with me, I won't go.' 'Surely I will go with you,' she said. 'However, no honor will be yours on the way that you are about to go, for Adonai will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman.' So Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. Then Barak summoned Zebulanim and Naphtali together to Kadesh, and 10,000 men marched after him, and Deborah went up with him. Now Heber the Kenite had separated himself from the Kenites, from the children of Havav, the father-in-law of Moshe, and had pitched his tent as far as the oak of Zarnaim, which is near Kadesh. They told Sisera that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. So Sisera ordered all his chariots, 900 iron chariots, and all the troops that were with him, from the Harosheth Hagoyim to Gishon. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Arise, for this is the day in which Adonai will deliver Sisera into your hand. Has Adonai not gone out before you?" So Barak came down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. Adonai threw Sisera and all his chariots and all his army into confusion before Barak with the edge of the sword. Then Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot. But Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Horosh Hagoyim. The whole army of Sisera fell by the sword, not one was left. Meanwhile, Sisera fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between King Yavin and Hazor in the house of Heber the Kenite. So Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Turn aside, my lord, turn aside to me, don't be afraid." So he turned aside to her into the tent, and she covered him with a blanket. He said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." So she opened a skin of milk and made him drink some, and covered him. Then he said to her, "Stand at the entrance of the tent, and if anyone comes and asks you, saying, 'Is there a man here?' then you will say, 'There's no one.'" Then Jael, Heber's wife, took a tent pin and got a hammer in her hand, and approached him stealthily and drove the pin into his temple until it reached through into the ground. For he was exhausted and in deep sleep, so he died. Now behold, as Barak was pursuing Sisera, Jael came out to meet him and said to him, "Come, I will show you the man whom you are seeking." So he entered with her, and behold, Sisera was lying dead with a tent pin in his temple. So on that day God subdued King Yavin of the Canaan before Bnei Israel.
Judges 5. Deborah's song. Then Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang on that day, saying, "When leaders take the lead in Israel, when people freely offer themselves, bless Adonai. Listen, O kings, give ear, O rulers. To Adonai I will sing praise to Adonai, the God of Israel. Adonai, when you came out from Seir, when you marched from Edom's field, the earth trembled, the heavens also dropped. Yes, the clouds dropped water. The mountains quaked before Adonai. This Sinai at the presence of Adonai, the God of Israel, in the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Yael, the highways were deserted. Travellers walked by crooked paths. Villages were deserted in Israel. Deserted until I, Deborah, arose, a mother in Israel, arose. They chose new gods. Then war was in the gates. No shield or spear was seen among 40,000 in Israel. My heart is with Israel's rulers, who offer themselves freely among the people. Bless Adonai. Riders on white donkeys, sitting on saddle blankets, travelling on the road, sing louder than the sound of archers at the watering places. There let them rehearse the righteous acts of Adonai, the righteous deeds for his villages in Israel. Then the people of Adonai went down to the gates. Awake, awake, Deborah, awake, awake, utter a song. Arise, Barak, lead away your captives, O son of Abinoam. Then a remnant of nobles came down. Adonai's people came down to me with the mighty ones. Those with root in Amalek are from Ephraim, following you. Benjamin, with your peoples from Mount Masher, came down rulers, and from Zebulun, wielding the marshal's staff.
Issachar's chiefs were with Deborah. Issachar was with Barak. In the valley they rushed at his heels. Among the divisions of Reuben there were great resolves of heart. Why did you stay in the sheepfolds to hear the piping of the flocks? Among the clans of Reuben there was much searching of heart. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan, and Dan, why did he stay by the ships? Asher sat at the sea coast, dwelling by its docks. Zebulun is a people who jeopardized their lives to death, and Naphtali also on the heights of the battlefield. The kings came, they fought. Then the kings of Canaan fought at Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo, but they took no spoil of silver. From heaven the stars fought. In their courses they fought Sisera. The Kishon torrent swept them away, that ancient torrent, the torrent Kishon. O my soul, march on with strength. Then the horses' hooves beat from the dashing of the mighty steeds. Curse Meroz, and the angel of Adonai. Utterly curse its inhabitants, for they came not to the aid of Adonai, to the aid of Adonai among the mighty. Blessed above woman is Yael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Above women in the tent she is blessed. Water he asked, milk she gave him. In a lordly bowl she brought him butter. Her hand reached for the tent peg, her right hand to the workman's hammer, and with the hammer she struck Sisera, she smashed his head. Yes, she crushed and pierced his temple. At her feet he collapsed, he fell, he lay. Between her feet he bowed, he fell. When he bowed, there he fell dead. Through the window Sisera's mother looked out, through the lattice, and lamented shrilly, "Why does his chariot delay in coming? Why do the wheels of his chariot tarry?" The wisest of her princesses answered her, "Yes," he repeats the words to herself. "Are they not finding, dividing the spoil? A maiden, maidens for every warrior. To Sisera a spoil of dyed garments, a spoil of dyed garments of embroidery, double dyed garments of embroidery for the necks of every spoiler. So let all your enemies perish, Adonai, but may those who love him be like the rising of the sun in its might." Then the land had peace for 40 years.
All right. Yep. 25 to 35. We had a split story on the send out sheet, but Sharon's sent the whole lot my way, so I'll read the whole thing. It is John chapter 6, or Yochanan, and we're reading from verse 25. When they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" Yeshua answered, "Yes, indeed, I tell you, you're not looking for me because you saw miraculous signs, but because you ate the bread and all that you wanted. Don't work for the food which passes away, but for the food that stays on into eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. For this is the one on whom God the Father has put his seal." So they said to him, "What should we do in order to perform the works of God?" Yeshua answered, "Here's what the work of God is: to trust in the one he sent." They said to him, "Nu." That's a sort of a little Hebrew thing, like, huh? Like, what? It's like a sort of an exclamation. It can also be like irritating little response. You know, like, yeah, sort of like that. "What miracle will you do for us so that we may see it and trust you?" Well, I'm incredulous. They're running there this day because they saw the miracle he did the day before where they all ate and everything. So wasn't that enough? You know, we all say, "Oh, we wouldn't have been like those Israelites in the desert. We wouldn't have complained like, oh, wouldn't we just?" "What work can you perform? Our fathers ate man in the desert. As it says in the Tanakh, he gave them bread from heaven to eat." Yeshua said to them, "Yes, indeed, I tell you, it wasn't Moshe who gave you the bread from heaven, but my Father is giving you the genuine bread from heaven. For God's bread is the one who comes down out of heaven and gives life to the world." And they said to him, "Sir, give us this bread from now on." Basically, they're still thinking of their stomachs. They're still thinking, "Oh, we won't have to go to work every day. We'll just be able to park off and eat this bread." They're not even thinking in the spiritual. They're just thinking purely in the physical. You know, we don't have to go to work anymore. Win the lotto and sit at home. You know, "Give us this bread from now on." Yeshua answered, "I am the bread which is life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever trusts in me will never be thirsty." And then on 47... 47. It's a good job I got glasses on, otherwise we could be here a while. "Yes, indeed, I tell you, whoever trusts has eternal life. I am the bread which is life. Your fathers ate the man in the desert, and they died. But the bread that comes down from heaven is such that a person may eat it and not die. I am the living bread that has come down from heaven. If anyone eats this bread, he will live forever. Furthermore, the bread that I will give is my own flesh, and I will give it for the life of the world." Shabbat Shalom.
So 1 Corinthians 13, 10, 1 through 13. For I do not want you to be ignorant, brothers and sisters, that our fathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea. They all were immersed into Moshe in the cloud and in the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they were drinking from a spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Mashiach, Messiah. Nevertheless, God was not pleased with most of them, for they were struck down in the desert. Now these things happened as examples for us, so we wouldn't crave evil things, just as they did. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. And let's not commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 fell. And let's not test the Lord, as some of them did, and were destroyed by serpents. And let's not grumble, as some of them did, and were destroyed by the destroying angel. Now these things happened to them as an example, and it was written down as a warning to us, on whom the ends of the ages have come. Therefore, let the one who thinks that he stands watch out that he doesn't fall. No temptation has taken hold of you except what is common to mankind. But God is faithful. He will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you can handle. But with the temptation, he will also provide a way of escape, so you will be able to endure it.
Great. Now we come to the end of the story. We started off at the beginning in Exodus, and now I've got the privilege of reading the sequel. It's Revelation 15, the song of Moses to the Lamb. Then I saw another great and wonderful sign in heaven, 7 angels who had 7 plagues. The last ones, for them God's wrath is finished. And I saw something like the sea of glass mixed with fire, and those who had overcome the beast and his image and the number of his name standing by the sea of glass, holding the harps of God. And they were singing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, Great and wonderful are your deeds, Adonai Elohe Zebaot. Just and true are your ways, O King of the nations. Who shall not fear and glorify your name, O Lord? For you alone are holy. All the nations shall come and worship before you, for your righteous acts have been revealed. After these things I looked, and the temple of the tent of witness in heaven was opened.
Well, last week's Parashah was called Bo, which means go or come. It actually means to come. But it's written about go. It's interesting how things operate, and I was just thinking about Sharon was saying that's an unusual song. The most unusual song she'd ever heard. And of course, God moves in totally different ways than we do. And hence that song ended up in the book of Revelation of Yeshua, written by Yochanan, John. So it's not about how fancy things we do. It's not about all the amazing things we do. We're ordinary people doing amazing things because of the amazing God. And that's the difference. That's totally the world upside down, because he believes in you when you believe in him. So last week's Parashah, it covered the final part of Yahweh's Elohim's, that means Lord God, his plan to remind and to make it clear to the Israelites and to Egypt, Pharaoh, that the world that he, the God of Avram, Isaac, and Yaakov, is the one and only true God. And that in itself is an anachronism to the world. Okay? They want to be all-encompassing. But unfortunately, if we want to serve our God, we have no choice but to say there is only one God. And that's the way, it may cost you your life, but that's the way it is. There is no other God before him He brought the fiasco to a head, and the conclusion making an example of Egypt's 10 gods with corresponding plagues. And the last one, the arrogant Pharaoh, with corresponding, was abased, along with his people. And the final scene of the plague of the firstborn being the prelude to redemption and consecration of his firstborn, Yeshua HaMashiach, the Messiah, Yeshua, or known as Jesus. And establishing his day of birth and death in the same month as the one who would be the Redeemer of mankind as the Lamb of God, bringing a new beginning. You can follow that last sentence up by reading some other things that we've written before. Won't introduce it to you now. But from my perspective, I believe, in accordance with the scriptures, that Yeshua was born on the 1st of Nisan, which is in just prior to Pesach. Others have different viewpoints. But if you want to know more, I'm able to explain it to you. A wonderful example was the Teshuvah, or bringing new beginnings to mankind. A wonderful example was the Teshuvah mikvahs, or baptisms, which occurred last Shabbat. Was anyone there? A number of people were there. It's exciting, wasn't it? Seeing people making a clear public decision that they are going to go totally forward in Yeshua. No turning back. Remember that song? Cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No turning back. And that's a really important thing, that we make that decision. It was a wonderful time. It creates a foundation point for you in your life. And until then, Elohim instituted the first of his memorials and Moedim, or appointed times and festivals. That's what that means. The head of the year, the biblical Rosh Hashanah, not as per the traditional Jewish custom of September. The 1st of Nisan in Aviv, which is spring, followed by Adonai's Pesach, his Passover. The 15th of Nisan in Aviv, to remind the future generations of God's might and his love for his people in providing a way of escape from bondage through the death of the Lamb, from the blood covering, which provides the escape from death. At the same time as Pesach, the Moedim, the Matzot, which is the festival of unleavened, it actually extends the period for 7 days as a reminder to get the influence of Egypt out of our lives. That's exactly in the same way that God wants to liberate you and me from the pharaohs of this world, from the slavery of sin, so that you and I can become slaves of righteousness. What a freedom! It is freeing to be a slave of righteousness. The enemy has no power over those who are slaves of righteousness. And that's reminded to us in Romans 6 verse 18. Yeshua also stated in Yochanan or John 5 verse 14, now go and sin no more. He says it's our responsibility that with the help of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, to work on the chametz, the unleavened things in our lives, the things that affect us and influence our thinking from a bad perspective. Once we've accepted Yeshua into our lives, It's important that we work out our salvation, it says, with fear and trembling. That's not working for your salvation. That's working out. From after he has provided us the grace. He's given us freely his salvation, his grace. But we have a responsibility to continue on and to work it through. Now this week's Parashah, B'Shalach, which means after he had let go, it commences with Adonai Eloheinu, the Lord our God, who understands the frailty of mankind, making a strategic decision to take his people, not the short way round, the long way round, to the promised land. The children of Israel had a quick lesson to learn about following Yahweh. They knew they would be heading to a land, the land of Canaan. They would have assumed that they would simply follow the coastal route, if anyone has been there, to follow the coastal route out of Egypt, follow it up the Mediterranean, have a swim in the water, enjoy that warmth, not like our nice cold water. Pick some of the fruit along the way, sit in the chairs, put the feet up. Just enjoy life as they're going out. And they'd be back in Canaan in just a few days. How sweet would that have been? Oh, but oh no. God doesn't take shortcuts. He said, the people might change their mind when they see war and return to Egypt. See, they hadn't realised, of course, that the coastal highway is guarded by Egyptian garrisons the whole way. And God didn't want the military confrontations to dissuade the people, to have an effect on them too early on. They weren't prepared. They weren't prepared for it. Besides, he had some important things to teach them in the wilderness before they arrived in Canaan. He wanted to deliver them at the Red Sea. He wanted to show them his might. He wanted them to see what an amazing God that he was. First hand. Yeah. And he wanted to give them the Torah at Sinai before leading them into the land. We're often in a hurry, aren't we, to reach our dreams and our goals. And it may be very frustrating to take the long way home through the wilderness. But really, life is about the journey as much as it's about the destination. And a lot of people think that being in the wilderness was punishment after but it was actually not so much that. It was training, it was preparation, development. And life is like that. Okay? Don't see it as a drudge or drudgery. It's not like that. Life is highs and lows. More lows than highs. And that's life. But see it as God developing us into his likeness. And time to step aside so that you can actually do it. From the hustle and the bustle and the rush and everything else. See it as a time that you adjust with you and God. He's more interested in seeing us develop in spiritual maturity than he is seeing us arrive at the dreams and the goals. He will often lead us along seemingly circular routes in order to teach us and prepare us for the things that lie ahead. And that's very much the Hebraic approach, the Hebraic way, is a very circular approach. Line upon line, precept upon precept. Learning, developing, sharpening, growing. He wants to build character, our character, And when we rush in without his leading and his training, we find ourselves surprised, sometimes by the challenges, and unfortunately, very quickly overcome. And that's not what God wants. He wants us to be able to say in the end of the day, well done, good and faithful servant. You've done what I've wanted and you've followed things through. That's what he wants. Great marathon development and running rather than a 100-metre dash. He needed time to get Egypt out of Bnei Israel, out of the people of Israel, and build their trust and confidence and reliance on him. And he says, be in the world, I've often talked about, be in the world but not of it. Learn God's ways. The same process is required today when we recognise and accept Yeshua as our Redeemer and Adonai, our Lord. He reminds us in Luke 14, verse 25, verse 35, which we read a few weeks ago. In fact, it was last week, I think. It says, anyone who wants to follow me must first count the cost and then take up his cross and follow me. The Exodus is the cornerstone of the children of Israel. The commandments, the promises, the essence of Judaism all begin with his departure from Egypt. The Exodus broke the power of Egypt and devastated it, in fact. And Egypt actually never regained its status as a great nation that it had been. Up until then, it was an amazing nation, being able to conquer and do all sorts of things. But from that point on, a second rate. Well, in comparison to the other nations that rose up. This devastation actually didn't happen because of the plagues or because of Pharaoh not letting the Israelites go. It was actually because Pharaoh just couldn't let go and humbly recognize his mistake at challenging the one true God. His reckless decision cost him and his empire everything. Sometimes the decisions we make, it's important that it says obedience is better than sacrifice. The last thing we want is for those that follow on after us to lose out on what they could have been because of you. And that can happen. The whole key is that they stand on your shoulders. They learn from your mistakes. They learn from your humility and your grace. And so that they can develop further and go beyond. That's a lesson that we need to all learn. We need to learn when to stop and when to change course. Now, Israel didn't grasp the enormity of the situation either. Despite all the mighty acts of God were performed to save them from Egypt in the face of Pharaoh's army, they became angry and afraid. And although they had just finished praising God for delivering them from Egypt in the mighty hand and the outstretched arm, and when they were faced with a real challenge as a free people, because they'd become free people, they fell into doubt, fear, and unbelief. Sound familiar? Our adversary Satan and his angels of darkness, they're intimidating. They don't want you to do well. They don't want you to succeed. They'll use cunning. They'll use the world's ways to intimidate you. And it's important to recognize them. And it takes time to remove the influence from our psyche, from our mind and our brain. So it talks about the renewing of our mind, washing with the word, listening to each other. You know, the Ruach lives in each other. Listen to each other. Keep your ears open. Don't turn it off. Especially those that you live with. Old habits, they die hard. The Israelites were a downtrodden, enslaved people for 200 plus years, developing a victim mentality. And while it seems that the Israelites didn't really believe in God's omnipotence and all his all-powerful, you know, omnipotence, all-powerful, omniscience, all-knowing, all-seeing, omnipresence, He's always there, all times. That's our God. It's more likely that they didn't believe that he would use his power on their behalf. They've been so downtrodden for so long and have been greatly affected in everything they did, that it was going to take a bit of time for them to actually get their full trust back and their hope. These have one, these are really good, but when you touch the wrong button, they interpreted this new threat with a victim mentality and not with the mindset of victorious people chosen and protected by God. They thought they were going to die, and they blamed Moshe. This victim mentality of being persecuted and downtrodden, worn down over the many centuries, actually contributed to so many perishing at the Holocaust. Actually, Holocaust Remembrance Day is on the 27th of January. Now, the calamity was the failure to deal with an ingrained belief that the whole world is against them. And as a result, many Jews no longer want to be God's chosen people. Hence, many have no belief system. So as part of it, our responsibility and role is to help them again see that there is a true living God who loves them and cares for them, and to draw them back. That's the responsibility, it says of the Gentiles, is to woo them back, encourage them. And it's wonderful and it's great that there is a changing tide amongst many Gentile believers and Jewish believers to gently woo them, to make them jealous, and to show them their Jewish Messiah, Yeshua. And it's wonderful, the many groups that are being involved. And in fact, I was watching a video clip from Netanyahu, and he thanks the many believers around the world for their care for Israel. The crossing of the Red Sea was a turning point in Israel's relationship with God. And up until this point, the miracles were entirely orchestrated by God. At the Red Sea, however, the Israelites, for the first time, they became directly involved in the miracle of their deliverance and their fate. The impossible tight spot forced them to cry out to God and to actually take action. That's what God wants. He wants his people to totally rely on him. To stay out of bondage, the Israelites had to make the first move. There's a time to cry out to the Lord, a time to intercede and pray, and there's a time to just move forward in faith. It's called Kadima. Go forward. Go forward. Often when we read the account of Exodus, or Shevat, we distance ourselves from the unbelief of Israel, though we should be examining the fears and doubts in our own hearts. That's why every Jew is bound to retell the story of the Exodus at Pesach, as though God was delivering each one personally out of bondage. And that's a really important part of it. Every year it comes around, each person needs to place themselves there, each Jewish person especially, as a reminder of what they've been delivered from. Not their grandfathers, not their forefathers, not their things, that each one of us has. Because he doesn't have grandchildren, he only has children. Just like the Israelites in the bondage in Egypt, when we spend years of our lives in servitude in the kingdom of darkness, we also learn to live in fear and expect the worst. And as the people of God were set free by Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah, we must become confident enough to step out on faith, trusting God to lead, to guide, and to direct our footsteps. And just as the Exodus was the starting point of Israel's salvation, so is our rescue from the kingdom of darkness just the beginning of our spiritual journey. But as the enemy of our souls does not give up easily, he usually tries to draw us back into bondage. He's constantly there, constantly nagging, constantly wanting to pull us back. He doesn't want us to be effective. He doesn't want us to be effective fathers. He doesn't want us to be effective mothers. He doesn't want us to be effective people in our community, making a change, making new things. I'm sure that Doug's had plenty of brickbats, pressure. Being involved in Hand Up International, trying to stop people, getting them out of poverty, getting them out of slavery. Satan doesn't want that. He wants to control. But Yeshua wants to free. He wants to bring life. But sometimes when our backs are against the wall, as was the case with Israel when it stood at the Red Sea, and we wonder, what should I do? Instead of panicking and getting angry at others, we can put our trust, our faith into practice, believing that he will save us. And after that, we need to enter into his rest and wait on the Lord for further instructions. Because he is the one that brings change. He is the only one that can bring of heart. We can lead people to water. We can lead people through things, and that's our responsibility. But it's only the Holy Spirit that really can draw and change. How many times have you set a goal for yourself, and the moment something didn't go as smoothly as you had planned, you immediately experienced self-doubt and seriously questioned your ability, your worthiness, and even the goal itself. And the dream that you were so certain you wanted ends up slowly drifting into the large sea of other unaccomplished goals and dreams that you had in the past. Isn't it amazing that on Monday you knew exactly what you wanted with crystal clear clarity, and you had a solid plan in place to achieve it? And by Wednesday, you're about to give up. If we remember that the Lord fights our battles for us, then we can quiet the inner turmoil and trust in him. Hold our peace and refuse to speak unbelief when pushed to your limits. This Shabbat has a special name. It's called Shevat Shareh, or Shirah, the Sabbath of singing. Because of the song of Moshe, the song of the sea, also known as As Yeshua Moshe, it will be recited in the synagogue. And it says, I will sing unto the Lord, for he is highly exalted. Both the horse and rider he has unfurled into the sea. Remember that song from years ago? I will triumph gloriously, the horse and rider thrown into the sea. Well, yeah. The Lord our God, the Lord my strength. Oh, yes. And I tell you what, one of the most important things is when you're feeling down, when you're feeling lousy, some of the most important things you need to do is sing a song. You need to lift yourself up. It says, lift yourself up in the most holy faith. Singing songs. Yeah. Singing in the Spirit. Encourage yourself. So important. That's why being baptized in the Holy Spirit is so important. Lift yourself up, encourage yourself. Be victorious, be powerful. Be able to overcome. Be able to stand firm in times of difficulty. The Israelites sang this song with great joy as they passed safely through the Red Sea. And then witnessed the Pharaoh's armies destroyed in the sea. Who was victorious in their singing when they were thrown in prison? Shaul and Silas. Yeah, they showed example by how believers should actually act when they face calamitous, unjustified situations. They shouldn't have been there. But did they grumble? No. Acts 16 verse 25 to 26 says, but about midnight, Paul and Silas, they were praying and singing hymns to God. Now, don't forget, they'd been whipped. They'd been flogged. You know, they wouldn't be feeling too good at all. They probably didn't even have any water to go with it. A bit like me, my mouth's so dry. But anyway, Paul and Silas, they were praying and they were singing hymns to God. And the prisoners were listening to them. Because this is it. It's not when everything's running beautifully and smoothly will people look at you or want to think. It's when you're going through that press, that hard patch, they'll look and say, far out. Oh. Hey, they dealt with that pretty well. Why? Then you can come with your answer. Oh, thanks, love. The strength of the Holy Spirit, the Ruach Hadashah. That's when they can see it. That's when the people can see it. And that's the Jewish people. They will see it. They will. It's sometimes we talk about trying to do everything quite kosherly, so keep them happy and everything. No. Yes, there's a certain aspect, but it's important. They want to see the true God. They see the effect that He has in your life, and it makes them jealous. That's what He wants. They want to see the real true God. And our responsibility is to make them jealous. And we have a relationship, I talked about last week, didn't I? That we have a relationship with Yahweh. We have a relationship with Him. And that's what they miss out on. They don't have that, especially the rabbis. They don't have that close relationship. But they do if they accept Yeshua, if they accept the Ruach HaKodesh, then they have the close relationship. And that's the difference. Make them jealous. Yeah, be sensitive. Don't get me wrong. It's important to be sensitive. But it's not doing it their way. Doing it Yahweh's way. And while the Song of the Sea forms the high point of the readings, the Song of is also read in the Haftarah. The song was sung by Deborah, the only female judge mentioned in the scriptures. And after Sisera, the commander of the Canaanite army, was killed by another woman, Yael. The female encore in the Song of the Sea is Shreya Miriam. It's the Song of Miriam. Since she and the maidens went out with the tambourines, singing and dancing with great joy, singing praise to the Lord, is the one of the highest forms of spiritual warfare. And this is echoed in the book of Revelation of Yeshua, written by Yochanan, which establishes clearly a clear link between praise, warfare, and She'er Moshe, the Song of Moshe. Those defeating the beast and its images and the number of its name were standing by the sea of glass, holding harps which God had given them. And they were singing a song of Moshe, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb. Great and wondrous are the things you have done, Adonai, God of the heaven armies. Now, Israel's moment of personal faith occurred on the shores of the Red Sea. After they saw Pharaoh's army destroyed and the deliverance that God gave them through Moshe, they placed their faith in God. And it says they feared Adonai and they believed in the Lord, meaning that they had faith in his saving power. And they now had faith in Moshe as their agent sent by God. Now, Yeshua made the same or similar statement to his disciples. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in Elohim. Believe also in me. This is Yochanan or John 14:1. And just as they had previously placed their faith in God, they need also to place their faith in him as God's agent of salvation. And just as Israel believed in Moshe, the disciples needed to believe in Yeshua. This faith in Yeshua is a critical distinction of a believer's life. We find that many people today are willing to confess faith in God, but they seem embarrassed to confess faith in Yeshua. We're called believers because we believe in Yeshua. We are called believers because we believe in Yeshua. We find salvation in him because we have placed our faith, our trust in him. We believe in Elohim as he is revealed through the teachings and the person of Yeshua. And Moshe saved the children of Israel from Egypt, from the Pharaoh in the Red Sea. Yeshua saves us from sin, from Satan, and from death. And he will bring us into redemption and the kingdom. It's wonderful. We don't have to work for our salvation, as it's a free gift. We only have to work out our salvation so we understand clearly what it means to live in ways. That's why I encourage you to regularly spend time in his word, in what he's written. Clearly understand what he's written is not just for everyone else. It's actually for you and me and for us to live our life by. Spend time in it and you will have life. Hu Yavo Yeshua, Yeshua is coming. Shabbat Shalom.
We better sing after that. It's good, isn't it? You sing whether you feel like it or not. And it will change you. is our God. He is great all the time. And someone's